Welcome back to another episode of Real Talk and ELT. Okay, so this week I have been deep diving and kind of in the weeds of building out some task structures for teenagers because I got a question. It was actually last week, which prompted this whole week of like, well, let's talk about teens. Every time I get like teenager questions because okay, let me roll this back a second. I love teenagers. I love how angry they are. I love how just moody and they're trying to figure out the world and like their place in it and they don't really know what they stand for yet, but they're trying to, test all of those little waters. I love being with teenagers because I think they're funny. They come up with things that it's just they're infuriating too also, but I do find them to be humorous in general. So I get some questions from some teachers at a school about, just teens and dealing with them. And every time I work on teen material or kind of like how to engage them, the same thing always kind of comes back at me. It's like, well, teenagers, adolescent, whatever, their engagement is not really that big of a mystery. And it's not super random. And it's certainly not personality traits, though personality influences lots of things. When we talk about like teen engagement, it's like something you either have in class or you don't, as if like, oh, teachers get lucky and they're charismatic or they're with the good group of teenagers and the rest of us are just battling, cell phones and silence or like just utter chaos in the classroom. And then you kind of zoom out a little bit. You have to think about, well, what kind of patterns are we seeing with these teenagers? Because the same teenagers who are quote unquote disengaged in one lesson will suddenly focus and they'll speak up and they'll start participating. And then it's like, wow, okay, where did this come from? And then immediately they shut down again. And it's like, well, where are you going, right? So that should immediately tell us something important, that it's not necessarily about motivation with teenagers because motivation comes and goes. It's all about design. And I think this matters because it puts engagement, however we want to classify that, and I'm going to talk about it, back where it belongs. It's inside our professional control because this is not a personal failure if they're not engaging or a classroom management issue. It's something that we can deal with. So that's where I'm going to go today. Hey there, it's Kelly, and if you're here for miracle fixes, shiny classroom hacks, or whatever today's buzzword is trending, not gonna happen. What you will get is real talk about English teaching, teacher training, and the chaos we actually deal with in ELT. So let's get into it. All right, so let's start with naming some of those predictable teen disengagement patterns that we see, because I think this is kind of, we'll break this episode into chunks as I typically try to do. But so first chunk, section 1, I don't even know what we can call this. Chunk 1. We're going to go with chunks today. If you teach teens online, and honestly kind of in person too, you're going to recognize some of these patterns instantly. So where does the disengagement start? And this is what we see. Cameras are off, or just like no eye contact if you're teaching face-to-face. Long silences after questions, which I already talked about this, but I can talk about it a million other times. Like, silence is okay. If you're teaching, you need to get comfortable with silence, but it does pass a limit sometimes. You often see one confident student dominating, the kid that always sits up front, just like hands up all the time. And the rest of them are just letting that person roll with it. And so the others, just kind of disappear entirely. There's sudden chaos when a game starts or some sort of break from classroom routine, drop off hallway. Like, where have you ever seen those movies? It's like the hallway just like it just starts extending out in front of you, and it's like, oh no, I can't get to that. Or like a dream, like you're running in slow motion. You're just like, okay, so there's like when students start dropping off, it's like that hallway effect for me where your lesson's like, I'm never going to get to the end of this lesson. So that happens, like they're halfway through a task and it sounded really good on paper. And then all of a sudden you get that long tunnel, like, oh, this is going to be a long class. So we usually describe these issues kind of as attitude problems. Oh, well, they come to English class, they're tired, they're not motivated, they don't like English, they don't want to speak. And sorry, I got something in my throat. I'm trying to hydrate it all the way down, but it's just not going. But when you look at what's actually happening cognitively, not that I'm a cognitive scientist, but I know like a little bit that kind of, here's what I think is happening and what teens are juggling with. Because I think if you look at it from a them problem to like what's happening with them, you might be a little bit, not that teachers aren't compassionate, but kind of understanding. So teens are juggling with, well, first, if you're teaching English, they're language processing, right? They're trying to figure out what's happening, especially if you're teaching them in an all English classroom, which is important that you do. They're also juggling with instructions. If you're online, tools and platforms. If you're in the classroom, they're managing books. Oh my God, I saw recently a study that showed, it was in the US, and I forget the percentage, but it was saying that there's a lot of children entering schools nowadays and they don't know how to use a book. And they classified the book as a technology. Like they don't know how to use the technology because what the kids are doing nowadays. God, that sounded really old. I just dated what the kids are doing nowadays. What the kids are doing nowadays, like if they have a book, they're trying to like use their fingers and zoom in or swipe to change the pages. Like they don't know how to use it, which was horrifying. I mean, I'm laughing, but also I'm horrified with this whole concept. So tools and platforms, they're pretty good with managing tools like social media tools, but functional tools, sometimes not so good at it. They also have peer awareness. Peers, if you remember being a teenager and a child, are super judgmental. So that's happening. And they're juggling with their own self-image. So all of that's happening at once in the classroom. And if you're teaching online, like I do, primarily, online environments definitely amplify this. Every task asks them not only to speak English, but it also exposes them socially. And silence is often not a refusal for them. It's just risk avoidance. Like they don't want to be outed in front of their peers. And the most important thing here is it's like when tasks are vague, open-ended, too long, this is where we start to see disengagement because it's the logical outcome. It's not a surprise. If you think about it, like if they don't really know what to do, if it's too long or if it's too open that, if they start being creative and go off in their own direction, then people are going to judge them and be like, where did this psycho come from? Because that's something that would come out of a teenager's mouth. So, all right, moving on. So this is like what they're dealing with. Now we have to think about, and this is a pet peeve of mine, why quote unquote fun is the wrong goal. I hate people who equate, and I'm going to put hate. I know it's a strong word. I hate people who equate, or the notion, not necessarily the people, but this idea of equating fun and engaged. I hate that notion because it's just so off point for me. It's so ridiculous that for you to be engaged in something, it needs to be fun. Like sit here for a moment and think about is that every time that you engage with something, it's because it brings you some sort of joy or because it's fun. That is not true. That is not true, just ever, for me. Can it be? Yes. But like, it's not the equivalent. If you're engaged in something, it's that it's just occupying all of your cognitive load is focused on, like, this is what I'm doing in the moment. And that can be something that's not fun, but it could be enriching. It could be interesting. It could be curious. It could be dramatic. It could be sad. It could be profoundly disturbing, but you're engaged with it. That fun does not equate to engagement. And like, we need to remove that, because here's why. Part 2 or chunk 2 or wherever we're going with this is that there is a lot of well-intentioned teachers out there who go wrong, especially with teens, because we're told this, and irritates me. Teens need to have fun things, games, energy, constant novelty, as if they don't get that enough with their little cell phones that are connected, almost physically connected to their hands at all times. They are constantly on devices that provide this games, energy, novelty. They have short attention spans now. And so thinking that bringing that into the classroom is going to force learning, because at the end of the day, we're in a classroom, we want them to learn. Like, that, how much it's not logical to me. So what do teachers do? Because this is what you see online, and this is what everybody wants, and this is what society wants. And maybe I'm going to have a problem with the next generations of society and how everything goes, but teachers over gamify things. They add competition without clarity, and then they turn tasks into entertainment. Entertainment is not learning. Entertainment is entertainment. Can you get something? Can you glean information from something that's entertaining? Sure. But those are not the equivalents. Like they just, so, okay. So then what happens, right? Because this is what teachers tend to do. What happens in the classroom, from what I've seen, is that the confident teens get louder. The quieter teens retreat. Cognitive load increases for everyone, and the teacher spends more time managing than actually teaching or facilitating the learning process. And for me, the uncomfortable truth here is entertainment does not equal engagement. Engagement comes from a very structured challenge, not necessarily excitement. Can they be excited about it? Yeah, sure. But it's not, again, it's just not the equivalent. And we have to remove this idea that we can equate these things. It's like, oh yeah, they're totally, when I do observations with teachers, and I love teachers. This is the thing, I love teachers, but I feel like we just need to kind of shift our, and I hate this word too, but mindset about it, like shift our perspective about this. I say, well, do you think that the students were engaged with the task that you proposed and that you delivered throughout the lesson? Like, how was the engagement levels? And they say, oh yeah, they were talking the whole time and they were joking. And it's like, okay. So, but were they engaged in the task, or were they off doing random things? Because when we equate entertaining and laughing and joking to engaging with something that's going to promote the learning process, like, this is where our class is boring all the time. No, I use humor in all my classes because I'm sarcastic and I just don't take life too seriously, to be honest. Like, nothing, like, we live in a simulation. Like, this is just like, okay, whatever. But you know what I mean? Like, you can't take your life too seriously. You can't, it's just, they can't be like downer classes, but engagement is not the same as entertainment. Can you have some entertaining aspects to get their attention? Yes. But once you get their attention, then you must keep them engaged. So one of the books that I mentioned on my social media this week specifically was the book Make It Stick. It's an interesting book. I think everybody should kind of take a peek inside if you have the chance to. But they do, inside this book, there are some really useful, but kind of useful ideas, but only if they're kind of translated properly. So they show the research that learning sticks when tasks are effortful, constrained, and goal-oriented. There's nothing in there about entertaining or fun necessarily. Can they be those things? Yeah, certainly. But they have to be effortful, constrained, and goal-oriented. And that's not boring because that's very anchoring for students. So for teens, constraints are actually calming. They reduce this choice paralysis, or the social risk, the uncertainty that comes with kind of like, here's a task, I need you to do this, right? So we need to add some of that structure in just for them to get the most benefit out of what we're giving to them. Yeah.
Super quick, I promise. If you're looking for a teaching certification, specialization, even a micro-credential, Bridge Edu is a solid pick. And with my link, you get 10% off any course they offer. Check out the link below and let's get back to it.
Okay, so then when leading into this, when I say like, okay, so we need to have structured engagement, and people are like, oh God, Kelly's classes must be so boring. And maybe they are, but I've been teaching for, a couple decades now, and I've had consistent students and people who always come back, and my business is built on recommendations. Not to toot my own horn, because it is what it is, but people tend to enjoy my lessons, and this is my perspective on it, so it might be helpful for other people. And I'm not militant about things. I do have a lot of fun. I'm constantly laughing. One of the neighbors, when I'm teaching, this was years ago too, and it's like, I've had this comment a couple times. They say like, what are you doing during the day? Because they know that I'm an English teacher and things like that. It's no surprise. They're like, what are you doing that you laugh so much during the day? And it's just interacting with students and giving lessons. So there is an aspect of fun and entertainment in my lessons. But what I'm saying is that is not the central focus of what I'm doing, especially when I'm teaching teens. And especially when I'm teaching online, because my business is online. Anyway, so I don't even know what chunk we're on. Next chunk for you to think about, because it's like in my notes, I have no numbers here, but okay, here we go. So what does this structured engagement actually look like? Because I'm not talking about these rigid worksheets or like teacher-led drills. And please don't think that I'm a militant teacher, because I'm not. But these principles kind of guide how I design things, and then I sprinkle in my personality afterwards. But it doesn't start with fun. It always starts with, how is this going to benefit the student? So I'm talking about tasks that answer three very important questions for teens, right? And this is what they should be. Well, let me just give you the question. So 1, what exactly am I doing? 2, what does the finished product look like? And 3, when does this task end? If your students can answer those questions after you've set up a task or after whatever you've designed, I'm telling you, when those things are clear, participation usually follows. Because the expectation is clear, and they're in a class voluntarily. Teens maybe not, sometimes they're forced, but they're there. They have to do it. They have pressure from their parents because they know that if they don't do it, then the teacher's going to talk to their parents and they're going to have problems at home, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but if they know these 3 things, what exactly am I doing? What does the finished product look like? And when does this task end? they probably will participate because they just want to get they want to get through the class, they're engaged with the test, they think it's really interesting, they're trying to get a better score on their college entrance exam, whatever it is, they just know that they have to get through this, and this little task, whatever it is going to get them there. Because this is why the task types like retrieval under constraint, comparison, prioritization, these work so well with teens because they limit the amount of language required at one time. They don't have to use everything and draw back on everything. It's like, oh, okay, I just need to find somewhere in my brain the language that allows me to do this specific thing. They shift their attention away from themselves and all that awkward, hormonal, weird energy that they've got going on, and they just focus on the task because it's like, this is not me. I just have to do this because the teacher said that I had to do this, or not. This is what I'm doing. I don't care what my peers are doing because my peers have to do exactly the same thing as me. And so it's not about them anymore. It's about like, I need to complete this. And they also give teens something external to point to when speaking. So it's like beyond themselves. It's kind of like, this is not, you can give them roles, you can assign them different characters. I remember one of actually, and I think he was way ahead of his time. I talked to him years ago. I had a French teacher when I was in high school. And this is back, oh God, we're pushing almost 30 years ago now. Like, we're pushing it. And this high school French teacher, he made us select our name in French. And it could be similar to what our name was, or it could be just like a completely different name. And he created, in our classroom, all the students had their own name, they had their own profession, and we created kind of a city. It was like our own little city or town, and it was just comprised of the students there. And so every time we went into French class, Mr. Herbert, he was awesome. Every time we went into class, we took on that persona. Now, maybe your teens are not going to like this or whatever, but I thought, because I'm actually, surprisingly enough, I'm a very shy learner. When I'm in a classroom environment, when I'm new to something, I'm actually very quiet. When I know what I'm talking about, outspoken, annoyingly so. But when I'm learning, I'm very, very quiet. I'm very, very shy. And I tend to be more reserved because I'm trying to piece it together in my head. And that's just kind of my learner personality. So for me, when I was in Mr. Herbert's French class, I was Colette. And that was my name, Colette. And everything that I did, everything that I, was kind of the persona of Colette. It wasn't Kelly per se. And I was in high school, I was a teenager, and it was actually pretty cool because I remember my sister had the same teacher. She was also a French student, and she had the same experience. And my sister is quite shy as well. She's not extroverted. I think kind of at all. She's more shy just in general. I'm a little more outspoken than she is. And so she also did very well in the class because took on her own kind of like persona of the person that she was supposed to be in French class. And so thinking out of the box, I mean, again, this guy was, doing this like 30 years ago, so 30 years ago, people and teachers were doing this in language classes and trying to get people, teenagers specifically, outside of themselves, taking them, that factor of like peer judgment and everything away from individuals so that they could just participate and do what they wanted. And if they said something outrageous, it's like, well, that was Colette, that wasn't me. So That was just a super random idea, but it was related to the external. They get to focus on something external. They get to kind of get away from themselves. And anyways, so again, going back, structure doesn't remove creativity. It creates the conditions for it, because here's the structure that this is what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to do it, and what time you're supposed to be able to complete this. And also, if you want to add on that fun kind of, in my opinion, it's a little twist, just a little spice to the classroom, is taking on different personas that allows students to just kind of forget about it and focus on, how do I get this done? Not like, oh my God, am I going to be judged? It doesn't really help them. Okay, next section. I have so many things to get through. That was a big deviation. Here we go. So next chunk is about cognitive load and social safety. This is why I was getting into it. I had many thoughts when I was putting some notes together here. So anyways, one thing we don't talk about enough, or maybe people do, I just, maybe not in my social circles, is how teens socially exposing themselves when they have to speak. It's just, I don't know. I think we've all experienced it, but maybe you're so far out of your adolescence that you forget. But you can go into those moments for English teachers, if you are in a professional organization like a teaching organization, and you apply to do some sort of presentation or something like that. You freak out a little bit. I mean, because we're all being judged by our peers, and that's hard for teens specifically. Adults are, can handle it sometimes a little bit better, but not always. Anyways, so these open discussions that we just expect teens to jump right into, they really ask teens to generate ideas, select language, monitor their accuracy, and manage their peer judgment. Let me go through that one more time, because it's a lot. Open discussion tasks, which we regard as like they should just be participating freely. They need to generate their ideas, select the language, monitor their accuracy, and they have to manage peer judgment. It's a lot, I mean, for anybody, but especially for people who are kind of figuring out who they are as a person. So structured tasks really lower the cognitive and emotional cost of that participation. So instead of saying like, what do you think? What's your opinion on this? Like, oh, you're kind of putting them on the spot. Can they do it? Sure. Do they have to do it? Absolutely. But maybe instead of saying, what do you think? Always. This is what I'm talking about. This repetitive, give your opinion, give your opinion. Maybe the task can become choose, or compare, or justify, or rank. So it's now not, the focus is no longer on like, this is me speaking English, but it becomes, no, this is me solving a problem. And that's a huge difference for teens, because, the quieter teens suddenly start speaking because we're just, it's such a small modification of the task design. It's not because they suddenly become confident, and it's because the risk has dropped for them. So I'm creating this, and it's available on Saturday as I try to throw my little downloadable PDF things out for teachers, resources for teachers. I tend to throw them out there on Saturday mornings. So I've designed quite a few of these and kind of run down like how you can use them and things like that. But so if you're interested, you can go look at that. But what I'm saying is, if you structure tasks better in this way, thinking about, reducing cognitive load and all of those good things, and giving them the structure, the constraints on it, they usually help the quote unquote weaker students, because teens are anxious. Some of them are perfectionists, especially in front of their peers. They are afraid of being wrong. The dominant speakers, let's talk about, they need boundaries too, because And there was, again, I'm going back to that thing where it's like, stop pushing introverted people outside of the box and start telling extroverted people to shut the hell up a little bit. And it's like, yeah, also that happens in the classroom too. Like we have dominant speakers and they also need boundaries. So these boundaries help both shyer students, because I identify more of like the shy student persona. When I'm a student, I'm a little bit shy, like, okay. And yeah, I've already explained that. Anyways, shy students, they need that because it helps them kind of participate more, but also boundaries for those dominant speakers. And mixed level groups, because unfortunately sometimes people are still working with like extreme mixed levels, and that can really kill participation. So there's like this big imbalance between, like an A2 and a B2 speaker. And, constraints can certainly help with that because everyone is working within the same structure. Participation then becomes like very visual, very shared. This is not personality driven anymore. It's like, this is just engaging with the task. So when people start engaging, what does that look like in your classroom? Next chunk, whatever, we can put a little ding here. Next chunk. So when tasks are really well designed, engagement doesn't necessarily look loud or chaotic, but it does look, and it's important for teachers to kind of start taking a step back and saying like, what's happening here? It does look like short bursts of really focused speaking sometimes. There's more voices and there's less noise. And if you're a teacher, you know what I'm talking about by noise. It's just kind of that like clattering that happens. So but that kind of reduces, but there are more voices. There's more contributions. There's fewer periods or points in times where we need to necessitate the interaction or necessitate like engagement there, because it's like we don't need the teacher prompts as much. And there's smoother transitions because you're able to kind of like, and done and seen, right? Because they know when it's supposed to end. They know what the finished product looked like. And then the students stay on task because we don't have to constantly monitor. We need to monitor, but our monitoring needs to be focused on language improvement, language development. It doesn't need to be, if you're constantly monitoring and the interventions are always about task completion and staying on task and classroom management, then I would say like, hey, you need to figure something out, because monitoring should be, the majority of it should be for the sole benefit of the learners and their language development. And if you're constantly having to intervene, like how much monitoring can you do? So I've given these tips and kind of guidance to a lot of mentees and trainees and things like that. And they often tell me that it feels like less exhausting in their classes because, hey, that's a great thing, less tired. Not necessarily because the teenage personalities that they're dealing with are easier, but because the design is doing the heavy lifting. Like it finally clicked for them. Let me design it properly. Let me spend a little bit more time, getting everything prepped. And then during the lesson, it just kind of flows and everything's good to go. Next chunk of my thoughts in my notes here is, so, okay, that's great. It feels better when everything's structured, but then what mistakes happen that break those engagement points? Because, we have to be honest that it's not like rainbows and puppies all the time, right? Like, okay, something's going to go wrong. So engagement usually breaks when tasks are too open-ended. You can't just say like, well, for anything. Oh, okay. Have you noticed Like when you're shopping online, I have option overload constantly where I can't even shop for things online because there's just too many options, and it's like I can't narrow it down anymore, and I get into like decision paralysis for sure. Students feel that when your task is like, yeah, you can just talk about anything. Well, just anything. Talk about anything. Why aren't you talking yet? It's like, it's too much. Give me a direction. And that's what they want. They need a little bit of direction. When timing isn't fixed, if I have unlimited time, well, like I'm not able to self-monitor if I'm making progress in the way that the teacher wants me to make progress in this. So you got to give them a time limit. Time limits help. Having unlimited time is not a good thing for learners. They need to be able to manage their own cognitive processes, you know? If they have unlimited time, then they're going to, try and come up with the most complex and dissertation-like discussion or text or whatever they're being asked to produce. Like, that's not the objective all the time. Time constraints help. Instructions are unclear, or, and this has been happening a lot with my observations lately, and it's bothering me. Shift mid-task. Your instructions are shifting mid-task. Please don't do that constantly. What I'm saying is it's a repeated pattern that I'm noticing. It's not like, clearly the task is not going the way it's supposed to be. Let me intervene and reset everybody, which is fine. But it's like I'm giving the instructions, and then before people even start working on the task, then I change the instruction. It's like, y'all need to figure it out beforehand. And you need to come up with contingencies that if it's okay, well, if I have an odd number of people, or if I have mismatched things, or if students can't access things online, you need to figure that out beforehand. You can't give instructions and then look and say, well, let me give these instructions. And then the students are sitting there waiting to like start the task. And then you realize that it's not going to work because the instructions you gave don't make sense for the number of people that you have, or for the how they're connected, or what resources they're using, or what resources they have access to. And then you change the instructions. You gotta figure that out beforehand. Sorry. Zero questions there. Games exist without outcomes. Why are we playing a game? Games are fun. I enjoy games. I engage with games. Very competitive. However, games need to have some sort of outcome. And teachers treat silence as resistance instead of confusion. Start diagnosing the silence in the classroom. Silence can mean they're 100% engaged. Silence can mean that they're completely confused and they don't even know where to start. Silence can mean you've given them unlimited time, so why should I start working right away? I'm thinking. If that's not what you wanted them to do, then you got to figure that out. So start diagnosing your silent periods, because that's going to help you. None of these things mean you're a bad teacher. Nope. It just means that most of us were never trained to design tasks for teenagers, especially online. Like, this is a whole new world, right? It's like a whole new thing. Like, it came out after the pandemic, which, another time I'll just have a chit chat about that. But like, now people are studying online and people have access, and okay, this is more prevalent. Everybody's doing it. It's very common, and we're teaching people online. Okay, so we have to figure out how to do that appropriately and effectively, and so that students actually make progress. Okay, so one idea that I want you to walk away with this whole rant and rave is that teen engagement, it doesn't happen by accident. Teens, I love this group of students. I think they're fun. They're miserable. They just like mood swings all over the place. They're trying to figure out what they believe in, what they don't believe them. They're fighting the system. They're testing limits. It's a whole mess. It's a whole hormonal mess. It's hilarious. It's fun. It's very undesirable at moments. And it's just, it's chaotic. But their engagement doesn't happen by accident. It's not discovered. We have to build it in. And so when disengagement shows up consistently, I'm not saying like once or whatever, consistently, my recommendation is to first look at task clarity, task length, cognitive load, social risk, not they got an attitude or they're not motivated or it's not their personality to engage with these things. So that's exactly why I've kind of been pouring myself into like thinking about, well, where can teachers go? Where can teachers go for this? So there's lots of resources. Of course, there's like courses. I recommend courses. They're in the show notes too. There's books, like Make It Stick, which is interesting. It might give you a new perspective. I'm creating my own little pack of things. It's these kind of frameworks that you can use. So it's not like, oh, this is one activity, like download this activity. No, it's like, here's the framework, and then you can apply it for all of your lessons if you want. Because when structure works, the teens usually do too. So my final little note for you is that engagement is an instructional decision. It's not a personality test. Good luck with those teens.
That's it for today. If you want more, I've got binge-worthy playlists right here on the channel. You can also grab some resources at kellypenningtonelt.com, Instagram at kellypenningtonelt, and yes, even LinkedIn, where I do my best impression of being professional. Links below. See you in the next one.